The morning sun cast a golden glow across the quiet countryside as William sat by the window of their modest cottage, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. The silence was almost overwhelming, broken only by the gentle ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. He glanced toward the bedroom where Kate lay sleeping, her face peaceful despite the storm they had weathered together over the past few months. William's mind drifted back to the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way except for the phone call that would alter their lives forever. Kate had been in the garden, tending to her beloved roses, when the doctor's office called with the test results. The words still echoed in William's memory, like a haunting melody he couldn't shake. "I'm sorry, but the results show some concerning abnormalities. We need you to come in immediately for further testing." He remembered how Kate's face had drained of color as she listened to the voice on the other end of the line. Her hands had trembled as she set the phone down, and for a moment they both stood frozen in their small kitchen, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. Kate had always been the strong one in their relationship. When William lost his job 3 years ago, she had been the rock that kept their family grounded. When his father passed away unexpectedly, she had held him through countless nights of grief and anger. Now, as he watched her sleep, he felt helpless in a way that cut through his very soul. The weeks that followed that phone call had been a blur of medical appointments, waiting rooms, and hushed conversations with specialists. Each test brought new questions, and each question seemed to lead them further into a maze of fear and confusion. William had taken time off from his new job, using up all his sick days and vacation time to be by Kate's side for every appointment, every procedure, every moment of waiting for results that might change everything. During those long days in sterile hospital corridors, William discovered things about himself he never knew existed. He learned that love wasn't just about the good times, the laughter, and the easy moments they had shared during their 8 years of marriage. Love, he realized, was about sitting in uncomfortable chairs for hours, holding hands in silence, and finding strength in each other when the world seemed determined to test their resolve. Kate, for her part, struggled with feeling like a burden. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to handle whatever life threw at her. Now, watching William rearrange his entire life around her medical needs, she felt a guilt that gnawed at her constantly. She tried to hide her fears, putting on a brave face during the day, but William could see through her mask. He knew her too well after all these years together. One evening, as they sat together on their old couch watching the sunset through their living room window, Kate finally broke down. The tears she had been holding back for weeks came flooding out, and with them came all the fears she had been trying so hard to hide. She was afraid of dying, afraid of leaving William alone, afraid of never seeing their future children grow up, afraid of all the dreams they might never get to fulfill together. William held her as she cried, his own tears mixing with hers. They sat there until long after the sun had set, talking about everything and nothing, sharing fears they had never spoken aloud. That night, something shifted between them. The pretense of strength fell away, and they began to face their uncertain future with honest vulnerability. The next morning brought news that would test them even further. Dr. Martinez, Kate's oncologist, called with the results of the latest biopsy. The cancer had spread more than they initially thought. Treatment would be more aggressive, more demanding, and the outcome was far from certain. The conversation lasted only 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. After hanging up the phone, William and Kate sat in their kitchen, staring at each other across the small wooden table where they had shared thousands of meals together. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts and fears. Finally, Kate reached across the table and took William's hand in hers. "We're going to fight this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but filled with determination. Together, William squeezed her hand and nodded, though he couldn't trust his voice to respond. In that moment, he made a promise to himself and to Kate. No matter what the future held, He would be her strength when she couldn't find her own, her hope when despair threatened to overwhelm them, and her constant reminder that she was not alone in this battle. The treatment began the following week. Chemotherapy sessions that lasted hours, radiation treatments that left Kate exhausted and nauseous, and a routine of medications that transformed their kitchen counter into something resembling a pharmacy. William learned to prepare the special meals that Kate's sensitive stomach could handle, researched every side effect and treatment option, and became an expert in the language of cancer that he never wanted to understand. Their friends and family rallied around them with an outpouring of support that was both overwhelming and deeply comforting. Kate's sister, Margaret, came to stay with them for 2 weeks, taking over the household duties and providing the kind of practical help that allowed William to focus entirely on Kate's care. Their neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, began leaving homemade soup on their doorstep twice a week, always with a note of encouragement attached. But perhaps the most unexpected source of strength came from the other patients and families they met during Kate's treatment. In the cancer center's waiting room, they formed bonds with people they might never have met under different circumstances. There was Robert, a retired teacher fighting his second battle with cancer, who always had a joke ready to lighten the mood. Sarah, a young mother whose optimism never wavered despite facing the same uncertain future as Kate. And elderly Mrs. Chun, who knitted scarves for every new patient she met, and somehow always knew exactly what to say when words seemed impossible to find. These relationships became lifelines during the darkest days of treatment. When Kate lost her hair and spent an entire afternoon crying in front of the bathroom mirror, it was Sarah who called at exactly the right moment to remind her that beauty came from so much more than physical appearance. When William felt overwhelmed by the weight of being Kate's primary caregiver, it was Robert who invited him for coffee and shared the wisdom that came from walking this path before. As autumn arrived and the leaves began to change color outside their bedroom window, Kate's treatment reached its most difficult phase. The side effects were becoming more severe, and some days she barely had the energy to get out of bed. William found himself taking on roles he had never imagined, becoming nurse, chef, housekeeper, and emotional support all in one. Some nights, he would lie awake listening to Kate's labored breathing, afraid to fall asleep in case she needed him. It was during one of these sleepless nights that William experienced what he would later describe as his breaking point. Kate was having a particularly bad reaction to her latest round of chemotherapy, and despite his best efforts to help her feel comfortable, nothing seemed to work. She was in pain, frustrated, and for the first time since her diagnosis, she seemed to be losing hope. "I can't do this anymore, William," she whispered through tears of exhaustion and despair. "I'm so tired of fighting. I'm tired of being sick, tired of feeling like I'm not really living, just surviving." William felt his own resolve cracking as he listened to the woman he loved more than life itself express the depths of her despair. He wanted to say something encouraging, something that would restore her fighting spirit, but in that moment he felt just as lost and frightened as she did. Instead of trying to fix her feelings or offer false optimism, William simply climbed into bed beside Kate and held her. They lay there together in the darkness, two people who had promised to face life's challenges together, now confronting the possibility that their time together might be shorter than they had ever imagined. "I'm scared too," William finally admitted, his voice breaking. "I'm terrified of losing you, of facing a future without you in it. But I'm also scared of giving up, of not fighting for every moment we can have together." That conversation marked a turning point in their journey. They began to approach Kate's illness not as something to be conquered or defeated, but as a challenge to be faced with grace, courage, and an appreciation for each day they were given together. They started making lists of small things they wanted to do together, experiences they could share even within the limitations imposed by Kate's treatment schedule. They began taking short walks in the nearby park when Kate felt well enough, appreciating the changing seasons and the simple pleasure of being outdoors together. They started a tradition of cooking one new recipe together each week, adapting ingredients and techniques to accommodate Kate's dietary restrictions, but focusing on the joy of creating something together. William also began documenting their journey through photography and journaling, capturing not just the difficult moments, but the instances of beauty, humor, and connection that emerged even in the midst of their struggle. He photographed Kate's hands as she tended to her small indoor herb garden, her smile when she beat him at their nightly game of cards, the way the afternoon light looked as it streamed through their bedroom window, where they spent so many quiet hours together. As winter approached and Kate's treatment regimen continued, they found themselves developing a deeper appreciation for the support systems that surrounded them. The medical team that cared for Kate became like family, with nurses who remembered her favorite tea and doctors who took time to explain every aspect of her treatment in terms they could understand. Their marriage, tested by circumstances they never could have anticipated, began to reveal new depths of strength and connection. They learned to communicate about their fears without letting those fears overwhelm them. They discovered that love could exist and even flourish in the face of uncertainty, that intimacy could deepen when stripped of pretense and false optimism. The holiday season brought its own challenges and unexpected gifts. Kate was determined to maintain some of their family traditions, even if they needed to be modified to accommodate her energy levels and health restrictions. They decorated their Christmas tree together over several days, taking breaks when Kate needed a rest, but savoring the familiar ritual of hanging ornaments that held memories from their years together. Christmas morning arrived with a gentle snowfall that transformed their quiet neighborhood into a winter wonderland. Kate woke feeling better than she had in weeks, and they spent the morning opening gifts and drinking hot chocolate by the fireplace. William had given Kate a small potted rosebush that she could nurture indoors during the winter months, a symbol of growth and renewal that brought tears to her eyes. Kate's gift to William was a handwritten journal filled with letters she had written to him during her sleepless nights throughout her treatment. Each letter expressed her gratitude for his unwavering support, her love for the man he had proven himself to be during their most difficult season, and her hopes for their future together, whatever that future might hold. As they sat together that Christmas morning, reading and crying and laughing, they both felt a sense of peace that had been absent from their lives for many months. The uncertainty about Kate's prognosis remained. The challenges of her ongoing treatment were still very real, but they had found a way to live within that uncertainty without being paralyzed by it. The new year brought fresh hope as Kate's latest test results showed signs of improvement. The cancer was responding to treatment better than her doctors had initially hoped, and while they stressed that she still had a long road ahead, the news provided the first real reason for optimism they had experienced in months. With this encouraging news came new challenges and decisions about Kate's ongoing treatment plan. They spent hours researching different options, consulting with specialists, and weighing the potential benefits and risks of various approaches. The process was exhausting and sometimes overwhelming, but they faced it together just as they had faced everything else. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Kate began to regain some of her strength and energy. The walks in the park became longer and more frequent. She started planning a small garden for the backyard, dreaming of the vegetables and flowers she wanted to grow when she felt well enough to spend more time outdoors. William returned to work part-time, though he remained Kate's primary caregiver and advocate. He had learned to balance his own needs with hers, understanding that taking care of himself was essential to his ability to support her through the ongoing challenges of her treatment. Their relationship with each other and with the community of people who had supported them throughout Kate's illness had been fundamentally transformed. They no longer took their daily moments together for granted, finding profound meaning in simple shared experiences that they might have overlooked before. The evening routine they had developed during the most difficult phase of Kate's treatment became a cherished ritual. They would sit together after dinner, sometimes talking about their day, sometimes reading quietly, sometimes just enjoying each other's presence in comfortable silence. These moments of peace and connection became the foundation upon which they built their hope for the future. As this chapter of their journey drew to a close, William and Kate found themselves changed in ways they were still discovering. The experience of facing Kate's cancer together had stripped away many of the assumptions and fears that had previously defined their understanding of love, commitment, and what it meant to build a life together. Spring arrived with an explosion of color that seemed to mirror the renewed hope Kate and William felt as her treatment progressed. The cherry tree in their backyard burst into bloom, its delicate pink petals dancing in the gentle breeze and carpeting their small garden with natural confetti. Kate stood at the kitchen window each morning, watching the tree with a sense of wonder that surprised her. After months of feeling disconnected from the natural world around her, she was rediscovering the simple joy of witnessing life renew itself. Dr. Martinez had delivered news that felt almost too good to believe. Kate's latest scans showed significant improvement, with several tumors shrinking beyond what they had dared to hope for when treatment began. The aggressive chemotherapy regimen that had left her so weak and sick was working, and while she still had months of treatment ahead, the trajectory was finally moving in the right direction. This good news brought its own challenges. After months of living in survival mode, Kate and William found themselves needing to navigate what felt like a completely new emotional landscape. The relief was overwhelming, but it came mixed with fear that felt almost superstitious. They had become so accustomed to bracing for bad news that accepting hope felt dangerous, as if acknowledging improvement might somehow jinx their progress. Kate began physical therapy to rebuild the strength she had lost during the most intense phase of her treatment. 3 times a week, she worked with Maria, a physical therapist whose own battle with cancer had ended in victory 5 years earlier. Maria understood not just the physical challenges Kate faced, but the emotional complexity of learning to trust her body again after it had felt like such a betrayer. The first session was humbling. Tasks that had once been effortless now required concentrated effort and frequent breaks. Walking up a flight of stairs left Kate breathless, and lifting weights that seemed laughably light frustrated her more than she expected. But Maria was patient and encouraging, helping Kate set realistic goals and celebrate small victories that gradually built into larger achievements. William accompanied Kate to most of her physical therapy sessions, serving as both cheerleader and witness to her gradual progress. He learned exercises he could help her with at home and became attuned to the difference between the kind of fatigue that required rest and the kind that could be gently pushed through with encouragement. These sessions became a metaphor for their entire recovery process. Just as Kate's body needed to slowly rebuild its strength and endurance, their relationship and their life together required careful rehabilitation. They had to learn how to dream about the future again, how to make plans beyond the next medical appointment, how to rediscover joy in daily life without feeling guilty about moving beyond the crisis that had defined their existence for so many months. One of their first attempts at returning to normalcy was planning a weekend trip to visit Kate's sister Margaret in the neighboring state. The journey would require careful coordination with Kate's treatment schedule and medical team, but Dr. Martinez had cautiously approved the plan as long as they stayed within driving distance of a major medical center. The preparation for this trip felt monumental. William packed a bag that looked more like a mobile pharmacy, including every medication Kate might need, emergency contact numbers for her medical team, and detailed instructions about what to do if she experienced any concerning symptoms. Kate chose her clothes carefully, selecting outfits that were comfortable but made her feel like herself again, rather than like a patient. The drive itself became an adventure in rediscovering their life outside the bubble of medical appointments and treatment schedules. They listened to music they had enjoyed before Kate's diagnosis, talked about books they wanted to read together, and played silly car games that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. For hours at a time, it was possible to forget that cancer had ever entered their vocabulary. Margaret's house provided a sanctuary where Kate could rest when she needed to while still feeling connected to family life in a way that had been missing for months. Margaret's teenage children, Kate's nephew Alex and niece Sophie, had been deeply affected by their aunt's illness. They had struggled with fear and confusion about what was happening to someone they loved so much. Seeing Kate looking healthier and more like herself again was emotional for everyone. Alex, who had been afraid to hug his aunt too tightly during her sickest days, finally felt comfortable giving her one of his characteristic bear hugs. Sophie, who had been writing letters to Kate throughout her treatment, but rarely receiving responses when Kate was too weak to write back, spent hours catching up on months of accumulated stories and questions. The weekend visit became a celebration of survival and recovery, but it also highlighted how much their family dynamics had shifted during Kate's illness. Everyone had been walking on eggshells for months, afraid to burden Kate with normal family concerns or conflicts. Now, they needed to learn how to include her in regular family life again, how to treat her as a whole person rather than just a patient who needed protection. Margaret had prepared Kate's favorite meal, a complex dish that required hours of preparation and had been impossible to manage during the months when Kate's appetite was compromised by chemotherapy. The smell of familiar spices and the sight of a beautifully set table brought tears to Kate's eyes. Such simple pleasures had taken on profound meaning after months of medical foods and eating restrictions. During dinner, the conversation gradually moved beyond Kate's health to encompass the normal range of family topics: work challenges, school events, neighborhood gossip, and plans for the summer. Kate found herself able to contribute to these discussions in ways that had been impossible when every conversation inevitably circled back to her treatment and prognosis. That evening, as they sat around Margaret's fireplace, Kate reflected on how much her perspective had changed. Before her illness, she had often felt frustrated by what seemed like trivial family concerns. Now, being included in these everyday worries and celebrations felt like a precious gift. The ordinary problems and joys of family life that she had once taken for granted now seemed like treasures to be savored. William watched Kate's interactions with her family and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the gradual return of her personality and energy. During the darkest days of her treatment, he had sometimes feared that even if Kate survived, she might never be quite herself again. Seeing her laugh with Sophie and playfully argue with Alex about a board game strategy filled him with joy that felt almost overwhelming. The trip also provided an opportunity for William and Margaret to have honest conversations about the impact Kate's illness had on everyone who loved her. Margaret admitted that she had felt helpless and guilty about living so far away during Kate's most difficult months. She had wanted to do more, but hadn't known what would be most helpful. William shared his own struggles with feeling isolated from friends and family who wanted to support them, but didn't know how to navigate the complexities of serious illness. Many people had offered to help in the beginning, but as months passed and Kate's treatment stretched on, some of those offers had faded. He didn't blame anyone for this natural response, but the loneliness had sometimes been overwhelming. These conversations helped both of them understand that Kate's illness had ripple effects that extended far beyond the patient and primary caregiver. Everyone who loved Kate had been affected, and everyone needed different kinds of support and understanding as they adjusted to her improving prognosis. Returning home from the weekend trip felt like crossing another milestone in their recovery journey. Their house, which had felt like a medical facility for so many months, began to feel like a home again. Kate started spending time in rooms other than the bedroom and living room where she had been confined during her sickest days. She returned to the small home office where she had once managed freelance graphic design projects before her illness. The computer hadn't been turned on in months, and dust covered the creative supplies that had once been such an important part of her identity. Sitting down at her desk felt like reuniting with an old friend she hadn't seen in far too long. Kate's first project was designing thank you cards for the many people who had supported them throughout her treatment. She wanted to create something beautiful that would express her gratitude for the meals, cards, visits, and countless acts of kindness that had sustained them during their most difficult period. Working on this project required her to go through months of cards and letters they had received, reminders of how many people had reached out with love and support. Reading through these messages again, Kate was struck by the variety of ways people had found to express care and concern. Some had written long, heartfelt letters sharing their own experiences with illness or loss. Others had sent simple cards with just a few words of encouragement. All had mattered more than the senders could possibly have known. William found Kate crying at her desk one afternoon, surrounded by these messages of support. When he asked what was wrong, she explained that she was overwhelmed not by sadness, but by gratitude for the love that surrounded them. She had been so focused on survival during the worst of her treatment that she hadn't fully absorbed the magnitude of support they had received. This realization led to a new project that would consume their evenings for weeks. Together, they began writing personal thank you notes to everyone who had reached out during Kate's illness. Kate designed beautiful cards, and both of them wrote messages expressing their appreciation for specific acts of kindness they remembered. The process of acknowledging their support system became a form of healing in itself. It allowed them to reflect on their journey from a perspective of gratitude rather than trauma. They remembered not just the fear and pain of Kate's illness, but the ways it had revealed the depth of love and community that surrounded them. As summer approached, Kate's energy continued to improve, and her treatment schedule became less demanding. Instead of daily medications and multiple weekly appointments, she was now seeing her oncologist monthly and taking medications that had fewer severe side effects. This shift allowed them to begin planning for a future that extended beyond medical necessity. They decided to take a proper vacation for the first time since Kate's diagnosis. After careful consultation with her medical team, they planned a week at a quiet beach cottage where Kate could rest when needed, but also enjoy the simple pleasure of being somewhere beautiful with William. The beach trip represented a significant psychological milestone. It required trusting that Kate's health was stable enough to be far from her medical team, and it meant spending money on something other than medical expenses for the first time in almost a year. Both of these steps felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. They arrived at the cottage on a Sunday afternoon in early June. The small house sat just a few hundred yards from the ocean, with windows that let in the sound of waves and the smell of salt air. Kate stood on the front porch for several minutes, just breathing deeply and feeling the ocean breeze on her face. The first few days were about rest and gentle activities. Kate spent hours sitting on the beach, reading books she had been too sick to concentrate on during her treatment. William joined her sometimes, but he also gave her space to rediscover solitude and independence that had been impossible during the months when he rarely left her side. They took slow walks along the shoreline each evening, talking about their hopes for the future and their fears about Kate's ongoing treatment. These conversations felt different from the crisis-focused discussions that had dominated their communication for months. They could talk about dreams and plans again, even while acknowledging the uncertainty that would always be part of their life now. On their fourth day at the beach, Kate surprised William by suggesting they rent bicycles and explore the nearby coastal town. She hadn't ridden a bike since before her diagnosis, and the idea of pedaling for several miles seemed ambitious given her still limited energy. But something about the ocean air and the sense of being on vacation made her feel ready to test her physical limits. The bike ride became an adventure that tested both Kate's physical endurance and their ability to navigate challenges together without panic. Kate tired more quickly than she expected and needed frequent breaks, but instead of feeling frustrated or worried, they turned the stops into opportunities to explore small shops and cafes they encountered along the way. At a small ice cream stand, they met an elderly couple who had been coming to this beach for their anniversary every year for 37 years. The woman shared that she had survived breast cancer 15 years earlier and wanted Kate to know that life could be fuller and sweeter on the other side of treatment than it had ever been before. These unexpected encounters with other cancer survivors had become a recurring theme in their journey. Wherever they went, it seemed they met people who had walked similar paths and were eager to share hope and practical wisdom. Kate was building a mental collection of these stories, proof that it was possible not just to survive cancer, but to thrive after treatment. The beach vacation also provided an opportunity for Kate and William to rediscover physical intimacy that had been complicated by Kate's illness and treatment. The medications, fatigue, and emotional stress of the previous months had significantly impacted this aspect of their relationship. They had both been understanding about these changes, but the loss had been another source of grief during an already difficult time. Being away from the medical environment and feeling stronger physically allowed Kate to reconnect with her own body in ways that had been impossible during active treatment. She began to feel less like a patient and more like a woman again. This shift was gradual and sometimes frustrating, but it represented another important aspect of her recovery. Their last evening at the beach, they sat on the cottage's front porch watching the sunset over the ocean. Kate reflected on how different she felt compared to the frightened, sick woman who had begun cancer treatment almost a year earlier. She was physically different, certainly, but the changes went much deeper than that. Her priorities, her understanding of what mattered most in life, her appreciation for simple pleasures had all been fundamentally altered by the experience of facing her own mortality. William, too, had been changed by their journey through Kate's illness. He had discovered reserves of strength and patience he didn't know he possessed. He had learned that love was not just a feeling, but a choice that had to be made repeatedly, especially during the most difficult circumstances. He had become a better listener, a more attentive husband, and a person who no longer took the gift of shared time for granted. As they prepared to return home from their beach vacation, both Kate and William felt ready to embrace the next phase of their recovery journey. Kate's treatment would continue for several more months, but they now had evidence that life could include joy and adventure even while managing ongoing medical care. The drive home was filled with planning and dreaming in ways that would have been impossible even a few months earlier. They talked about home improvement projects Kate wanted to tackle when her energy fully returned, trips they wanted to take, and ways they wanted to give back to the cancer community that had supported them so generously. Their house welcomed them back with the familiar comfort of home, but it no longer felt like a place defined by illness and limitation. Instead, it felt like the launching pad for whatever adventures and challenges awaited them in their continuing journey together. The autumn following their beach vacation brought with it a sense of cautious optimism that Kate and William had learned to cherish without taking for granted. Kate's latest test results continued to show improvement, and Dr. Martinez had begun using words like remission and survivor in their conversations. These terms felt almost foreign after months of focusing solely on treatment and managing side effects, but they opened up possibilities that had seemed impossible just a year earlier. Kate's physical strength had returned to about 70% of what it had been before her diagnosis. She could manage most daily activities without assistance, though she still needed to pace herself and plan for rest periods. The small victories accumulated daily: cooking dinner without exhaustion, sleeping through the night without pain, walking to the neighborhood coffee shop, and back without needing to sit down. William had gradually returned to working full-time, though his relationship with his career had fundamentally shifted. The months of prioritizing Kate's health above everything else had given him perspective on what truly mattered. He no longer stayed late at the office out of ambition or obligation. Instead, he protected their evening hours together as sacred time that couldn't be compromised by workplace demands. This new approach to work-life balance sometimes frustrated his colleagues, who didn't fully understand how profoundly Kate's illness had changed his priorities. Some viewed his boundaries as lack of commitment to his career advancement. But William had learned that no professional achievement could compare to the value of being present for the person he loved most, especially given how fragile and precious that presence had proven to be. Kate had begun considering whether she wanted to return to her freelance graphic design work or explore new directions for her professional life. The experience of facing cancer had sparked interests she had never pursued before. She found herself drawn to the idea of working with other cancer patients and families, perhaps through the hospital where she had received treatment or with one of the support organizations that had meant so much to them during their journey. The conversations about Kate's future career path led to broader discussions about what they both wanted their post-cancer life to look like. They had learned that surviving a serious illness didn't automatically return everything to exactly the way it had been before. Instead, it created an opportunity to intentionally choose what elements of their previous life they wanted to reclaim and what new directions they wanted to explore. One significant decision was their approach to having children. Before Kate's diagnosis, they had been casually trying to conceive and had assumed parenthood was in their near future. The cancer treatment had put those plans on hold, and the medications Kate had received raised questions about how long they should wait before trying again, and whether pregnancy would be safe for her ongoing health. These discussions with Dr. Martinez and a fertility specialist were emotionally complex. The desire to have children had intensified during Kate's illness, as they both became more aware of how much they wanted to share their love with the next generation. But they also had to weigh the risks and unknowns that came with Kate's medical history. The medical advice was cautiously optimistic, but emphasized the importance of waiting until Kate had been in remission for at least a year before attempting pregnancy. This timeline felt both reasonable and frustratingly long to Kate, who at 32 was increasingly conscious of how cancer treatment had compressed her sense of available time for major life decisions. While they waited for the all-clear to start trying for children, Kate and William decided to channel their nurturing instincts in other directions. They began volunteering at the cancer center where Kate had received treatment, helping newly diagnosed patients and families navigate the overwhelming early weeks of cancer treatment. Kate's role involved meeting with women who were just beginning chemotherapy, sharing practical tips about managing side effects, and emotional strategies for coping with the fear and uncertainty. She found immense meaning in being able to offer hope to people who were where she had been a year earlier, and these conversations helped her process her own experience in new ways. William worked with family members and caregivers, offering the kind of support he wished he had received during the most difficult phases of Kate's treatment. He organized a monthly support group for spouses and partners, creating a space where people could share the unique challenges of being a caregiver while dealing with their own fear and grief. Their volunteer work brought them into contact with families facing every possible outcome from cancer treatment. They celebrated with couples who received good news about successful treatment, and they grieved with families dealing with progression or loss. These experiences reinforced their gratitude for Kate's positive prognosis, while also deepening their empathy for others walking similar paths. One family they met during their volunteer work particularly touched their hearts. Maria and Carlos had been married for just 6 months when Maria was diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma. They were both in their early 20s, and the diagnosis had completely derailed their plans for building a life together. Kate and William took Maria and Carlos under their wing, offering practical support and emotional guidance during the early months of Maria's treatment. Watching this young couple navigate challenges similar to what they had faced brought back memories of their own darkest days, but it also highlighted how much they had grown and healed since then. Maria's treatment was more intensive than Kate's had been, requiring several hospitalizations and a bone marrow transplant that kept her isolated from friends and family for weeks. Kate and William visited regularly, bringing books, puzzles, and most importantly, proof that it was possible to come through cancer treatment with a marriage that was stronger rather than damaged by the experience. Carlos struggled with many of the same caregiver challenges William had faced, including the isolation that came from having friends who couldn't understand what they were going through. William made sure Carlos had someone to call during the hardest moments, and they developed a tradition of meeting for coffee every Sunday morning to talk about whatever was weighing most heavily on Carlos's mind. These relationships with other cancer families became an unexpected source of healing for Kate and William. Being able to give back to others facing similar challenges provided meaning and purpose that helped transform their traumatic experience into something that could benefit others. They began to see their journey through cancer not just as something they had survived, but as preparation for a life of service to others facing similar battles. As winter approached, Kate received news that would mark another major milestone in her recovery journey. Dr. Martinez recommended that she could begin spacing out her follow-up appointments, moving from monthly visits to quarterly check-ins. This transition felt both liberating and terrifying, as the regular appointments had provided reassurance and connection to her medical team. The shift to less frequent medical oversight represented another step toward normalcy, but it also required Kate and William to trust that her body would continue healing without constant professional monitoring. They had to learn to distinguish between normal aches and pains versus symptoms that might indicate a problem requiring medical attention. Kate's first 3-month gap between oncology appointments became a test of their ability to live with uncertainty while still embracing hope and planning for the future. They established new routines that didn't revolve around medical schedules, and they began making plans that extended beyond the next doctor's appointment. One such plan was a trip to visit William's brother David, who lived across the country and had been wanting to see them since Kate's diagnosis. David had offered multiple times to visit them during Kate's treatment, but they had always felt too overwhelmed by medical appointments and side effects to host visitors. Now, planning a visit to David's family felt like a celebration of how far they had come. The trip would involve air travel, which Kate hadn't attempted since before her diagnosis, and staying in someone else's home, which required a level of flexibility and energy that had been impossible during active treatment. The journey itself went more smoothly than they had dared to hope. Kate handled the flight well, and being in David's household with his wife Sarah and their 2 young children provided a glimpse into the kind of family life Kate and William hoped to have someday. Watching William play with his nephews, Kate felt her heart full with anticipation for when they could have children of their own. David and Sarah had prepared carefully for their visit, making sure Kate had a quiet space to rest when needed, while still including her in family activities. The children, ages 4 and 7, had been prepared for their aunt's visit with age-appropriate explanations about her illness and recovery. What surprised Kate most was how naturally the children accepted her as she was now. They didn't seem to notice the changes in her appearance or energy level that felt so significant to her. To them, she was simply their Aunt Kate who was visiting, and their unconditional acceptance helped her see herself through less critical eyes. The visit also provided opportunities for deeper conversations with David about how Kate's illness had affected William. As brothers, David and William had always been close, but the geographical distance and intensity of Kate's treatment had limited their communication during the most difficult months. David shared his perspective on how much William had changed during Kate's treatment, developing a depth of compassion and resilience that was evident in every conversation they had. He also admitted his own feelings of helplessness at being so far away during a time when he wanted desperately to support his brother but didn't know how to help from a distance. These family conversations helped Kate and William understand how their experience with cancer had affected their entire extended family network. Everyone who loved them had been touched by Kate's illness and had found their own ways of coping with fear and uncertainty about someone they cared about deeply. During their visit, Kate and William also spent time talking with David and Sarah about their own experiences as parents gathering insights and advice about the challenges and joys of raising children. These conversations felt like preparation for a future that was becoming more tangible as Kate's health stabilized. Sarah, who had struggled with infertility before conceiving their first child, understood some of the complex emotions Kate faced around pregnancy and family planning after a serious illness. She offered perspective on balancing medical recommendations with personal desires and the importance of taking family-building decisions one step at a time. The flight home marked another successful milestone in Kate's recovery, but it also brought them back to the reality of continuing treatment and follow-up care. Kate still had several months of maintenance therapy ahead, and they both understood that reaching the 5-year mark cancer-free would be the real measure of long-term success. Back home, they settled into winter routines that reflected their new normal. Kate had developed a morning meditation practice that helped her start each day with intention and gratitude rather than anxiety about her health. William had taken up photography as a way of documenting their recovery journey and capturing the beauty he was learning to notice in ordinary moments. Their relationship with each other continued to evolve as they moved further from the crisis phase of Kate's illness. They were rediscovering aspects of their personalities and partnership that had been overshadowed by the demands of managing cancer treatment. They were learning to be husband and wife again, not just patient and caregiver. One area that required ongoing attention was communication about Kate's ongoing needs and limitations. As she looked healthier and stronger, some people in their lives began to expect her to be completely back to her old self. Kate sometimes struggled with feeling pressure to downplay fatigue or discomfort to avoid disappointing others who were celebrating her recovery. William learned to advocate for Kate's ongoing needs while also supporting her desire to reclaim independence and normalcy. This balance required constant recalibration as Kate's abilities and energy levels continued to improve, but remained different from what they had been before her illness. Their financial situation had also been significantly impacted by Kate's cancer treatment, despite having good insurance coverage. The copays, travel expenses for appointments, and loss of Kate's income during treatment had created debt that would take years to repay. They were learning to navigate these practical consequences of serious illness while rebuilding their financial security. These money concerns added stress to their recovery process, but they also motivated both Kate and William to think creatively about their future earning potential. Kate began exploring the possibility of building a business around her artistic skills that would provide more flexibility and potentially higher income than traditional employment. William investigated opportunities for advancement in his current job and considered whether additional training or education might open doors to better-paying positions. They approached these career development discussions as a team, supporting each other's professional growth while maintaining the life balance priorities they had discovered during Kate's treatment. As spring approached again, marking nearly 2 years since Kate's initial diagnosis, they began planning what they called their second anniversary celebration. This date marked not a traditional milestone, but rather the beginning of Kate's journey toward recovery and their growth as a couple who had faced the worst possible circumstances and emerged stronger. The celebration they planned was simple but meaningful, a weekend trip to the same beach cottage where they had vacation during Kate's early recovery. This return visit would allow them to measure how far they had traveled, not just geographically, but emotionally and physically since that first tentative trip away from medical supervision. Planning this return trip felt like closing a circle and opening a new chapter simultaneously. They were no longer the frightened, exhausted couple who had cautiously ventured away from home for the first time after cancer treatment. They were survivors, advocates, and partners who had learned that love could not only survive the worst circumstances, but could actually be strengthened by facing them together. 2.5 years after Kate's initial diagnosis, she received the words they had been hoping to hear for so long: no evidence of disease. Dr. Martinez delivered this news with a smile that reflected her own investment in Kate's journey. Having guided them through the darkest and most uncertain months of their lives. The appointment that day lasted longer than usual, as they celebrated this milestone and discussed what the future would hold. The transition from cancer patient to cancer survivor was more complex emotionally than Kate had anticipated. For so long, her identity had been shaped by treatment schedules, medical appointments, and the constant awareness of fighting for her life. Now, she faced the challenge of rediscovering who she was beyond the context of illness and recovery. William experienced his own version of this identity shift. He had become expert at being a caregiver, advocate, and medical interpreter. His days had been structured around Kate's needs and treatment requirements. With Kate's health stabilized and her independence fully restored, he found himself needing to remember how to be a husband rather than a nurse, a partner rather than a protector. They celebrated Kate's clean bill of health with a dinner at the restaurant where they had had their first date nearly 10 years earlier. Sitting across from each other at the same table where they had nervously shared dessert as young people just beginning to fall in love, they marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. Kate looked beautiful in a way that went beyond her physical recovery. She had gained weight and her hair had grown back, but more importantly, she radiated a confidence and peace that came from having faced her deepest fears and emerged victorious. The woman sitting across from William that night was both the same person he had fallen in love with and someone entirely new, shaped by experiences that had tested and strengthened her in profound ways. William, too, carried himself differently than he had before Kate's illness. The experience of potentially losing the person he loved most had eliminated any tendency to take their time together for granted. He was more present, more attentive, and more willing to express appreciation for the ordinary moments that made up their shared life. As they toasted Kate's clean scan results with glasses of wine they had been saving for exactly this occasion, they reflected on how cancer had paradoxically become both the worst thing that had ever happened to them and the experience that had taught them the most about love, resilience, and what truly mattered in life. With Kate's health no longer a daily concern, they turned their attention to dreams that had been on hold during treatment. The question of starting a family moved to the forefront of their planning, and Dr. Martinez had given them clearance to begin trying to conceive whenever they felt ready. This decision brought up emotions neither of them had fully anticipated. Kate felt pressure to get pregnant quickly, as if making up for time lost to cancer treatment. She was acutely aware that she was now 34, and the ticking of her biological clock felt louder after having faced the possibility that she might never have the chance to become a mother. William wanted to support Kate's desire for children, while also ensuring they didn't lose the hard-won peace and stability they had achieved in their relationship. He worried about adding the stress of fertility concerns on top of their ongoing adjustment to post-cancer life. Their first months of trying to conceive were filled with an intensity that surprised them both. Every month brought either crushing disappointment or renewed hope, and they found themselves riding an emotional roller coaster that felt familiar but unwelcome after the stability of Kate's recovery period. It was Kate's oncology nurse, Jessica, who suggested they consider counseling specifically focused on family planning after cancer. Jessica had watched many patients struggle with the transition from survivor to parent and understood the unique challenges they faced. The counselor they chose, Dr. Patricia Williams, specialized in working with couples who had faced serious illness and were navigating major life transitions. Her office became a safe space where Kate and William could express fears they hadn't even admitted to themselves about pregnancy, parenting, and the ongoing uncertainty that would always be part of life as cancer survivors. Dr. Williams helped them understand that their urgency around conception was a normal response to having their sense of time and mortality disrupted by cancer. She encouraged them to approach family planning with the same patience and intentionality they had learned to apply to Kate's medical care. 6 months into their fertility journey, Kate conceived. The pregnancy test showed positive on a Tuesday morning in November, exactly 3 years after the phone call that had changed their lives forever. Kate stared at the test for several minutes before calling William at work, her voice shaking with joy and terror in equal measure. William left work immediately and drove home to find Kate sitting at their kitchen table, surrounded by 3 different pregnancy tests, all showing positive results. They held each other and cried, overwhelmed by gratitude and fear about this new chapter they were beginning. The early weeks of pregnancy were shadowed by anxiety that felt disproportionate to normal first-time parent nervousness. Every doctor's appointment brought back memories of waiting for test results during Kate's cancer treatment. They found themselves bracing for bad news, even when everything appeared to be progressing normally. Dr. Sarah Chun, Kate's obstetrician, understood their unique concerns and took extra time to explain every aspect of prenatal care and what to expect throughout the pregnancy. She coordinated closely with Dr. Martinez to ensure Kate's cancer history was properly considered in all pregnancy-related decisions. Kate's body responded well to pregnancy, though she was more tired than she had expected and struggled with morning sickness that reminded her uncomfortably of chemotherapy nausea. These physical challenges were manageable, but they triggered emotional responses that surprised her with their intensity. William found himself hypervigilant about Kate's health in ways that went beyond normal expectant father concerns. He watched for any sign that pregnancy might be too demanding for her body, still recovering from the trauma of cancer treatment. He had to consciously resist the urge to treat Kate like a patient again rather than celebrating her as an expectant mother. Their 20-week ultrasound appointment became a celebration that helped shift their focus from fear to joy. Seeing their healthy baby moving and growing on the ultrasound screen, learning they were expecting a daughter, suddenly made the pregnancy feel real in the most wonderful way. They decided to name their daughter Hope, a choice that felt obvious given the journey that had brought her into existence. This tiny person represented not just their love for each other, but their triumph over the circumstances that had threatened to derail their dreams of becoming parents. Kate's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she found herself embracing the physical changes and limitations with grace that surprised her. After years of her body feeling like something that had betrayed her with cancer and then needed to be carefully managed during recovery, pregnancy allowed her to experience her body as something miraculous and creative. William threw himself into preparing for fatherhood with characteristic thoroughness. He read books, attended every prenatal appointment, and worked on converting their spare room into a nursery. The room that had once served as a makeshift medical supply storage area during Kate's treatment was transformed into a space filled with soft colors, children's books, and carefully chosen toys. As Kate's due date approached, they both felt ready for this next adventure in ways they might not have been if cancer hadn't taught them about resilience, patience, and the preciousness of life. They had learned to find joy in uncertainty and to support each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. Hope arrived on a sunny morning in early June, after a labor that was challenging but uncomplicated. William held his daughter for the first time while Kate rested, overwhelmed by love for this perfect little person who represented everything good that had emerged from their most difficult years. The first months of parenthood tested Kate and William in new ways, but they approached the challenges of sleepless nights, feeding difficulties, and the constant demands of caring for an infant with perspectives shaped by their experience with cancer. The exhaustion of new parenthood felt manageable compared to the exhaustion of chemotherapy. The uncertainty about whether they were making the right parenting decisions seemed minor compared to life and death medical decisions they had navigated together. Kate's body recovered from childbirth more slowly than she had hoped, reminding her that her physical reserves were still different than they might have been without her cancer history. She had to be patient with herself and accept help from William and family members more readily than her independent nature preferred. William discovered that being a father came naturally to him in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. The caregiving skills he had developed during Kate's illness translated beautifully to caring for their infant daughter. His patience, attention to detail, and ability to remain calm under pressure made him an excellent partner in the demanding early months of parenthood. Hope proved to be a remarkably healthy and happy baby, reaching all her developmental milestones on schedule and showing early signs of a strong personality they suspected she had inherited from both parents. Kate would often hold her daughter and feel overwhelmed with gratitude that she had survived cancer to experience the joy of being Hope's mother. Their house, which had been so quiet and focused on medical care during Kate's treatment, was now filled with the sounds of family life. Hope's cries and laughter, children's music, and the constant conversation that surrounded caring for a baby. The transformation felt complete and deeply satisfying. As Hope approached her first birthday, Kate reached the 5-year mark since her cancer diagnosis. This milestone was significant in cancer survivorship, representing the point at which statistical cure rates improved dramatically. Dr. Martinez scheduled a comprehensive follow-up appointment to mark this anniversary. The appointment included extensive testing and scans, the first comprehensive evaluation Kate had undergone since completing active treatment. Waiting for these results brought back familiar anxiety, but it was tempered by 5 years of evidence that her body had successfully fought off cancer and gone on to create new life. When all the test results came back clear, Dr. Martinez officially pronounced Kate cured rather than just cancer-free. This distinction felt significant, representing not just the absence of disease, but confidence that the cancer was unlikely to return. That evening, Kate and William celebrated with Hope playing on a blanket between them in their backyard garden. The space Kate had dreamed of planting during her early recovery was now mature and flourishing, filled with vegetables they grew for their family table and flowers that attracted butterflies and bees. Hope took her first steps that same week, as if she understood this was a time for new beginnings and major milestones. Watching their daughter take those tentative steps across their living room, Kate and William felt the symbolic weight of the moment. They had all emerged from the shadow of cancer and were moving forward together into whatever adventures lay ahead. Their volunteer work at the Cancer Center had continued throughout Kate's pregnancy and early motherhood, though they had scaled back their involvement to accommodate their new responsibilities as parents. They now co-facilitated a monthly support group for couples dealing with cancer during their childbearing years, sharing their story and the lessons they had learned about holding on to hope while facing uncertainty. These sessions were always emotional, as they met couples at various stages of treatment and recovery, all grappling with questions about fertility, pregnancy, and parenting in the context of cancer. Kate and William could offer something precious to these families, living proof that it was possible to survive cancer, conceive, and carry a healthy baby, and build a family life they had always dreamed of having. As Hope grew into a curious, energetic toddler, Kate and William found themselves discussing whether to have another child. The decision was complicated by Kate's cancer history and the awareness that pregnancy would again require careful coordination with her medical team, but it was no longer shadowed by the fear that had dominated their first pregnancy. They ultimately decided to try for a second child, and Kate conceived more easily the second time around. This pregnancy felt different from the beginning, less anxious, more joyful, and filled with confidence that came from having successfully navigated parenthood and maintained Kate's health simultaneously. Their son, James, arrived 2 years after Hope, completing their family in a way that felt perfect and intentional. Kate's labor and delivery were easier the second time, and her recovery was faster, evidence that her body had fully healed from the trauma of cancer treatment. With 2 healthy children and Kate's continued good health, they felt their family was complete, and their journey from cancer patients to survivors to thriving parents had reached a beautiful conclusion. The house that had once been so focused on medical care and recovery was now filled with the chaos and joy of raising two small children. Kate returned to her graphic design work when James was 6 months old, but she had restructured her business to focus on projects that felt meaningful to her. Much of her work now involved creating materials for cancer organizations, hospitals, and support groups. Her artistic skills, combined with her personal experience with cancer, made her uniquely qualified to create communications that resonated with patients and families facing similar journeys. William had been promoted at his company, recognition of both his professional skills and the maturity and perspective he had gained during Kate's illness. His priorities remained clear. Family first, work second, and everything else was negotiable. His colleagues had learned to respect these boundaries, and some had even adopted similar approaches to work-life balance after witnessing the success of William's model. 10 years after Kate's initial cancer diagnosis, their family had settled into rhythms that felt sustainable and fulfilling. Hope was now a bright, curious 8-year-old who knew her mother was a cancer survivor, but understood it as just one aspect of her family's history rather than something that defined them. James had never known a world where his mother's health was uncertain, and he accepted her regular medical checkups as normal family routine. Kate's annual follow-up appointments had become celebrations rather than sources of anxiety. Each clear scan and good report was another year of evidence that they had truly beaten cancer and moved on to build the life they had always wanted. Dr. Martinez had become like family, sharing in their joy about the children's milestones and achievements. Their marriage had not just survived the test of serious illness, but had been strengthened by it in ways that influenced every aspect of their relationship. They communicated more directly, appreciated each other more consistently, and never took for granted the gift of shared time. Friends often commented on the special quality of love they observed between Kate and William, a depth of connection that seemed unusual and precious. The legacy of their cancer journey extended beyond their own family through their continued involvement with newly diagnosed patients and their families. They had helped dozens of couples navigate the early months of cancer diagnosis and treatment, offering hope and practical guidance based on their own experience. Kate had also begun speaking at medical conferences and support group events, sharing her story and advocating for better support for young adults facing cancer and fertility concerns. Her willingness to be vulnerable about their struggles and triumphs had made a difference in the lives of countless other families facing similar challenges. As they tucked their children into bed each night and reflected on the day's activities, Kate and William often felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built together. The cancer that had once threatened to destroy everything had ultimately taught them lessons about love, resilience, and gratitude that enhanced every day of their life together. Their story had become one of transformation rather than just survival, proof that even the most difficult circumstances could lead to growth, deeper love, and a richer appreciation for the ordinary miracles of family life. They had faced the worst that life could offer and discovered that love, determination, and hope were powerful enough to overcome any obstacle and create a beautiful life on the other side of suffering.